Hello, y'all, and welcome to another episode of Disrupt Your Now, the show for entrepreneurs who are ready to shake things up and who are sick and tired of checking off the boxes. It's time for you to create your own boxes. And tonight, my guest is my friend Michael Hingson. You have probably heard of Michael, even if you haven't read his books. He and his guide dog, Roselle, survived 9/11 in the World Trade Center. And not only did they survive 9/11, they also helped sighted people survive. Michael was born blind. And we are here today to talk about overcoming your fear and changing your life mindset, and to talk about his upcoming book, Live Like a Guide Dog. So, welcome to the show, Michael.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, as always.
Yeah, it's great to see you. Now, for people who aren't familiar with you, I want you to introduce yourself and tell them a little bit more, in addition to what I just said. And I think a lot of people, even if they don't know who you are, have heard about you on the news, but
Oh, probably.
yeah.
Um, well, I have been blind my entire life. And I think what people probably have mostly heard about me is that on September 11th, I worked on the 78th floor of Tower 1 of the World Trade Center. I had been hired by Quantum Corporation in 1999 to open an office, and we got a great deal on office space in the World Trade Center because the occupancy rate was down due to the bombing in 1993, even
Mhm.
though there wasn't that much damage done. But still, I learned about it, learned from the real estate agent that they really were trying to get people in. So we got a great rate and moved into the offices on August 1st of 2000. And the company that I worked for manufactured the products that people would use to back up their computer data over their networks and store the data on magnetic tape,
Mhm.
what was called digital linear tape and then super digital linear tape, very high density tape systems. And you attach it to the network and then you dump all the data across. And the reason that was extremely important, especially for Wall Street, was and is that the SEC requires that you keep all of your data for at least 7 years and store it off-site so that if anything ever happens to your company, the data is safe somewhere. Well, who would have thought? So we sold and manufactured and created a lot of the tape technology that was used to back up data. Well, on September 11th, we were going to be holding some sales seminars teaching some of our reseller partners how to sell our products. And I was in the office, and and my guide dog Roselle was asleep under my desk. And the only other quantum person was David Frank, who was my colleague from California. And David was there because he was going to be explaining to resellers the pricing models and talking with them about pricing. David normally wouldn't be there. I was going to be the main point of contact, and I would be the one that they would turn to get things addressed. And having a master's degree in physics, I'm pretty technical anyway. So I was going to be able to help them and also get them in touch with other people at Quantum if issues came up or we needed to do that. Well, at 8:45, 8:46 in the morning, the building shuddered. We heard a muffled thump, and then, and I'm holding up my hand and now I'm tipping it toward the screen and my
Mhm.
camera. That's what the building did. Tall buildings like that are actually big springs. They're made to buffet in the wind. They're made to be able to shake around because of windstorms and so on. And it wasn't that because the building was tipping in one direction. We
Mhm.
moved, I say, about 20 feet. I don't know for
Oh my
sure, but that's
god.
what I believe we did. And not knowing what happened, of course, people always say, well, you're blind. You didn't know. Excuse me, folks. The
Yeah.
last time I checked, when an airplane hits a building around the 96th floor on the other side of the building from me, no one knew what went on. And the
Right.
last time I checked, Superman and X ray vision were fiction. So
Yeah.
there was no way to know. Anyway, we didn't know what happened, but then the building eventually stopped tipping. David and I had actually said goodbye to each other because we thought we were about to take a 78th floor plunge to the street. But then
Mhm.
the building came back and became vertical again. And as soon as it became vertical, I moved back into my office. I was standing in the doorway I grew up in California, actually somewhat on the San Andreas Fault. And back in those days, you learned building move, go stand in doorway.
Yeah.
Right. That's going to work in a non-bearing wall on the 78th floor of Tower 1. But that's what I did anyway. And as soon as the building stopped moving, I went back in and I met my guide dog, Roselle, coming out from under my desk. I took her leash. I told her to heel, which meant to come around on my left side and sit. And she did that. And about the time she sat, the building dropped straight down about 6 feet.
Wow.
Now, the reason it dropped was because I mentioned before that tall buildings like that are springs, and the expansion joints were just going back to their normal configuration.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as the building stopped moving, David turned and looked out the window when he started shouting, "Oh my God, Mike, there's fire and smoke above us. There are millions of pieces of burning paper. We got to get out of here right now. We can't stay here." And I said, "Slow down, David." And he said, "No, we got to get out of here right now. We can't stay here. The building's on fire." And I could hear things rustling past our windows. And now I knew what they were.
Yeah.
David explained it. Millions of pieces of burning paper falling outside our window. And he kept saying, "We got to get out of here." Our guests began to scream. We had some early arrivals who were in our conference room eating breakfast. They started moving out of the conference room toward the exit. Then they heard me say, "Slow down, stop, David." And so I think they were waiting to see what went on. And David kept saying, "We got to get out of here." And then finally, he used what I call the big line. He said, "You don't understand. You can't see it."
Oh, wow.
And the problem was not what I wasn't seeing, but what David wasn't seeing and probably didn't really know how to interpret.
Mm-hmm.
I had sitting next to me a dog on my left side, wagging her tail and yawning and going, "Who woke me up?" She wasn't exhibiting any kind of fear.
Mm-hmm.
And so the bottom line is that I knew that whatever was going on wasn't such an imminently close, dangerous thing to us that we couldn't try to evacuate in an orderly way. Why did I know that? Because I knew Roselle. I even knew what Roselle was like when she was afraid. But more important than that, I knew the World Trade Center. I had spent a lot of time when I first arrived in the complex and started working there, learning all I could about emergency preparedness, evacuation procedures, talking to police, fire authority, fire people, and so on. And so I knew all I could possibly know about what to do in an emergency. And that mindset kicked in. And the issue is, it was knowledge. It wasn't just a sort of a nebulous thing. I knew what to do.
Yeah.
And so that mindset kicked in. I wasn't afraid because I knew, as I said before, that whatever was going on wasn't so close to us that we couldn't try to evacuate in a reasonably orderly way. And I told David, when I finally got him to focus, get our guests to the stairs, don't let them take elevators, make them get to the stairs and start down, because I knew that if there was fire in the building, then it could easily get into the elevator shafts. Without going into a lot of detail, that was not a hard thing to happen. And it did, in fact.
Yeah.
So he left with our guests, got them to the stairs. I called my wife, Karen, told her what had happened. And she wanted to know more. I said, "I don't know anymore right now. So we're leaving the building. That's all I can tell you." And because the media hadn't gotten the story yet, it was like 8:47 in the morning when I called her. So it wasn't very long after the plane hit. The media hadn't gotten it. Anyway, David came back. We swept the offices. We went to the stairs and we started down. And, going down was a process. One of the things that I think is important for people to understand and know is, do not say a guide dog leads a blind person. Guide dogs do not lead us.
Mm-hmm.
It is not the dog's job to lead. It is not the dog's job to know where to go. I don't want my dog to know where she thinks, or now my current guide dog, Alamo, he thinks we should go. I could train the dog to go to a particular emergency exit. But what would happen if that exit weren't available? Then what? It's my job to know. And that's why I learned everything I could about the complex, so that in the case of an emergency, I would be able to look at all of my options and act accordingly. And so as we started down the stairs, I'm encouraging Roselle, "What a good dog. Keep going forward." And I tell her to go forward. She goes down a flight of stairs and turns left, because that's the only way you could turn, and then turn left again. And she stops at the next flight of stairs. "Forward, Roselle. Good girl."
Oh,
encouraging her and doing that because it was important for me to convey the message that I was okay and I
yeah.
wasn't going to be afraid, because then she's looking to me. Dogs look to their humans for guidance and for the rules. They generally don't want to be the pack leaders. That's what the human's for.
Mm.
And so we went down the stairs and I kept encouraging her, but other people started following us because, as they told me later, you sounded like everything was okay. We're just going to follow you down the stairs. And they did. And we helped a lot of people. I think one of the things, though, that is for me an important thing about that day is that about the 50th floor, David kind of lost it. And he said, Mike, we're going to die. We're not going to make it out of here.
Aw.
And I just said to David in my loudest, sharpest voice, stop it, David. If Roselle and I can go down these stairs, so can you. And he told me later that brought him out of his funk, but what he wanted to do was to take his mind off of things. So he said, I'm going to walk a floor below you and shout up to you everything that I see on the stairs. And so he did. So I got to the 49th floor and suddenly, hey, I'm at the 48th floor, Mike, going on down. And every time I got to a floor, he was a floor below me.
Mhm.
And finally, I got to like the 45th floor. He was at the 44th floor. Hey, Mike, I'm at the 44th floor. This is where the Port Authority cafeteria is. Not stopping, going on down. So he was doing better. Why do I bring it up? Because David, by shouting up to me, did I need him to do it? I didn't need him to do it, but it was fine and it helped him. But more important than that, what David did was act as a focal point for anyone above or below him who could hear his voice.
Yeah.
People on the stairs, thousands of people had to hear this guy, hey, Mike, I'm at the 43rd floor, all's good, shouting that he was okay. And that had to help keep people calm. And I'm
Yeah.
sure it did.
Mhm.
All the way down the stairs, he did that. So, that was an important thing as we went down the stairs. We had other things that happened on the way down, but we finally made it to the bottom and we got out of the complex. We were escorted out of Tower 1 to the exit they wanted people to leave through. And we were escorted by a guy from the FBI. And of course, I'm sitting there going, I didn't do it. You can't take me in. I was thinking that. And I was, I was just in my own mind trying to be flip. It's
Yeah.
just the time and it was the fun thing to do. And of course, I was sitting there going, I only answered a McGarrett from 5-0. But and I didn't say any of that out loud, but I was thinking it
Yeah,
was
you're
kind of fun.
taking it.
It was fun. But we got outside and then David saw fire in Tower 2. We had no clue. But what we discovered was that there was fire up in the tower. We were told to leave the area. And so what we did is we went over to Broadway and we started walking north on the west side of Broadway. Or if you're walking on Broadway going north, you're on the left side of the street. So there was a building on my left and Broadway on my right. And we finally got to Vesey Street. I think I've said other street names in the past, but I believe it really was Vesey Street that we got to. And David wanted to stop and take pictures because he could see the fire pretty clearly. Tower 2 was close to us. And so we stopped. I tried to call my wife. I couldn't get through. The circuits were busy. And as I learned later, they were busy because people were saying goodbye to their loved ones
Yeah.
up in the tower and so on. But I had just put my phone away and David was putting his camera away when a police officer yelled, "Get out of here. It's coming down now." We heard this rumble that became this roar, this deafening roar that I describe as kind of a combination of a freight train and a waterfall. You could hear metal clattering and glass breaking and all that. And then this white noise as Tower 2 was just pancaking straight down, doing exactly what it was designed to do. And everyone turned and ran. David ran. He was gone. I turned 180 degrees with Roselle and we started back the way we came. And there was debris falling around us. I got clipped in the ear by a couple small pieces of concrete, but we got to the next street back that we had already crossed. Now we went back to it, and that was Fulton Street. Turned right on Fulton Street. I ran about 25 yards and suddenly caught up to David. And David had stopped realizing that he had left me and was going to come back and try to find me. God bless David. But I found him first. And so we just continued then to run, now going west on Fulton Street. And suddenly we were engulfed in all the dirt and debris and the dust, the clouds of Tower 2's breakup.
Mm.
And we kept running. David said he couldn't even see his hand 6 inches in front of his face. And I don't know whether Roselle could hear me or not, but we clearly had to get out of that dust cloud. So I started telling Roselle to go right, and gave her hand signals. I don't know whether she could hear me or even see my hand signals, but I was also listening because if there were an opening on my right side, I would hear it.
Yeah.
Again, we're running next to a building and I would hear that. Well, I heard an opening, but Roselle obviously knew what I wanted. She turned right. She took one step, she stopped, and she wouldn't move. Come on, Roselle, keep going. No, she wouldn't move.
Mm.
Now, one of the things, and I talk about it in Thunderdog, when I first started running after the building started collapsing, David was gone, as I said. I turned and was running back on Broadway. The first thing I thought was, God, I can't believe that you got us out of a building just to have it fall on us. And when I thought that, I heard in my head, as clearly as your listeners hear me and you hear me, a voice that said, don't worry about what you can't control. Focus on running with Roselle and the rest will take care of itself. And I knew then and absolutely believe that was God telling me what to do, because I suddenly also had this absolute sense that if we worked together, we'd be okay. Well, so when Roselle turned and walked one step and stopped, at first I was going, come on, Roselle, keep going. Don't stop. And then I realized, focus on running with Roselle. The rest will take care of itself. I stuck a foot out and a hand along the wall and discovered that we were at the top of a flight of stairs.
Oh, wow.
Roselle did exactly what she was supposed to do. And she was waiting for the right command to go down the stairs, which is forward. Well, before we did that, she got a hug. And then I said,
good girl.
Then I said forward, and we went down the stairs. We took a couple of flights down, and then we were in a little arcade lobby entrance to the Fulton Street subway station. There were a few other people there, and then this guy named Lou came up from further down, and he mentioned that he was an employee of the subway system, and he said, follow me, I'll take you down to an employee locker room, which he did. We got down there, and when we got to the locker room, there were fans, and we were able to just sit. There was a water fountain, and people were hacking and coughing. There were about 8 or 9 of us in the little arcade area when Lou came up, and when he took us downstairs, there were a few other people there. We were there about 10 or 15 minutes when a police officer came and said, you need to leave the area right now. The air is clear up above. And so we just followed him back through the complex, up the stairs that we had come down, through the little arcade, up the last 2 flights of stairs, and got outside. And when we got outside, David looked around and he said, Mike, oh my God, there's no Tower 2 anymore. And I said, what do you see? And he said, all I see are pillars of smoke, hundreds of feet tall.
Wow.
I said, are you sure? And he said, that's all I see. It's gone. We stood there, and then we just continued west on Fulton Street, not able to make sense of it. And we walked about 10 more minutes, and then we heard that freight train waterfall sound again. We knew it must be our tower collapsing. And we were in a little plaza, and there was a retaining wall. We got behind the retaining wall and ducked down. And after we did, we waited for the wind to die down and the noise to stop. And then after all that happened, we got up, and David looked around and he said again, oh my God, Mike, there's no World Trade Center anymore. And I said, what do you see? And he said, all I see are fingers of fire and flame, hundreds of feet tall, and pillars of smoke. It's gone. Are you sure? Yeah, it's all gone.
Man.
We stood there for a moment, and then I called my wife, Karen, and this time I got through, and she's the first one to tell us how 2 aircraft had been hijacked and crashed into the towers, one into the Pentagon, and a fourth was still missing over Pennsylvania. And so the rest of the day we spent moving up toward Midtown Manhattan. We eventually learned that the trains were running from Penn Station back to New Jersey, so I wanted to get home to Karen. And I had learned from her that a friend of ours, Tom Painter, who Karen had known in high school out in California, who also lived in New Jersey, had come down, not even knowing if I was in the towers that day or not until he got to our house, and Karen told him, and he just stayed with her and then stayed with us for a week. But Tom drove Karen over to the train station in our van and picked me up. I should explain that Karen, her whole life was in a wheelchair. So she had a wheelchair accessible van, but
Mhm.
that night Tom drove her. They got to the station just as my train got to Westfield, and I came out of the train, heard the van, the door opened, and the ramp came down, and I got in the van and gave Karen a big hug, and Roselle got a big hug from Tom and Karen and everyone. We all hugged, and then we went home. We got into the house, and I decided I'm going to take Roselle out. So I took Roselle's harness off, and I unhooked her leash for a minute, and Roselle was off like a shot. And she was off to go get her favorite tug bone and started playing tug of war with my retired guide dog, Lenny. It was
Oh,
over for her. And
yeah.
as I talked with the people from Guide Dogs for the Blind later and said, how much of this do you think will affect her? The one question they asked was, did anything directly threaten her? And I said, no, nothing at all. And they said, well, nothing. Dogs don't do what if. And that's one of the lessons in Live Like a Guide Dog that we talk about. Dogs don't do what if. When it was over, it was over. And she was fine.
That's such a great point, Mike.
Well, it's, the problem is there's a time and a place for what if. The
Yeah.
difference between us and dogs is that we do more strategizing, and that's fine, but we what if things to death.
Mhm.
And we create fear. We become fearful because of things that happen rather than stepping back. We listen to people who tell us this is the way things are and this is what we should do, but we don't analyze for ourselves. We don't
Yeah.
really take the time to step back and look at things either.
Mhm.
Um, Dogs love unconditionally. I do believe that, but they don't trust unconditionally. Dogs are open to trust, which is something that we mostly are not. And the result is that with dogs, you have to earn their trust. And by the way, they have to earn your trust. But they're
Mhm.
open to doing that, and we're not nearly so open. Our politicians don't make that easy or doable. And
Mm.
we've got too many people who just buy into what some of them say without analyzing things for themselves and looking at reality. And so there is so much fear that comes about because of all of that, that we don't really think about things in a little bit more rational way. Yet we could learn to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. That is such an amazing story, and I remember that morning, my mother called me, and she's like, "A plane at the World Trade Center." My sister lived in Jersey and had called and told her. So I turned the news on, and I saw what I later realized was the second plane, but I saw it hitting, so I thought it was a replay.
Yeah.
Then I realized that the other tower was already on fire, so I realized, "Oh my gosh, this is the second one." But so, that's just everybody remembers where they were that day,
Yeah.
but I cannot imagine for people like Karen how long that day had to have been for them waiting to hear back, you
Well,
know?
well, and it was only about an hour and 45, 46 minutes, but still, yeah. And
It
actually,
had to have
Karen,
felt like forever.
well, and we talk about it in Thunderdog. Karen decided, I don't know whether he's going to come back or not. So she got up and she had been asleep. She got up, had some breakfast, and was actually straightening out the part of the house just because she said, one way or another, people are going to come visiting.
Yeah.
And so she started doing some of that. As I
Mhm.
said, she's in a chair, but we built an accessible house in New Jersey, so she was able to do all that. And then Tom arrived, and other things. But um, yeah, it had to be long, and it was hard.
Mhm.
And I can tell you that when I called her and finally reached her on the phone, there were tears on both sides of the phone. So
Oh, yeah. Well, with you and Roselle, y'all were calm, and people's first instinct reaction, whatever, is to freak out and panic, but they're also drawn to they want somebody to be calm, and they want somebody to be in charge, and so they were drawn to that, but also the fact that the guy you work with, your coworker, the fact that he gave himself a mission and something to focus on. That helped him focus on something, I guess, helped him calm down. But then, like you pointed out, by him doing that, that helped everybody else as well because he was
Sure.
providing information.
Sure. And I know I was calm because I prepared.
Yes.
I met with people, I learned all I could, I understood the process, and the mindset kicked in. The reality is, and I'm not going to say I wasn't afraid.
Yeah.
That's not what the case was at all. What was true was that I learned how to control fear,
Hmm.
and I learned how to use it as a very powerful tool. Believe me, I was listening for any creak and groan in that building as we were going down the stairs.
Yeah.
And being a fan of science fiction, I guarantee you, I had an imagination thinking of things that were even worse than what was going on, although I never thought of a terrorist attack. But, who knows? But the bottom line is that we can learn to use fear as a powerful tool to help us. We don't need to be blinded by fear.
Hmm.
And if people want to learn a little bit about that, I have a website. It's www.blindedbyfear.net. And they can go there, and there's a small ebook they can download. There's no charge. And that will start them kind of on the journey. But when Live Like a Guide Dog comes out, it's all about really the lessons I learned from 8 guide dogs and Karen's service dog, who we got in 2006. She was also a breeder at Guide Dogs for the Blind and was the mother of my 7th guide dog, Africa. So she had lots of work. But Fantasia figured out how to be Karen's service dog. She saw Karen drop something one day, and she just went over, and not even being trained to fetch, she picked it up, gave it to Karen, and was a service dog ever since. She
Oh,
she was a very bright dog,
what kind of dog was she?
a yellow lab.
Okay. Aw, they're so sweet. We
So, there are so many things like that, but it's preparation, and we can learn to develop the muscle of our mind to focus and learn how to deal with things rather than letting things blind or overwhelm us. And that's the issue.
Yeah, well, and I think and I'm sighted, as you know. My father was blind, but I'm sighted, and that many times is our weakness because we tend to just float through life. Most people who I probably would be the same if I'd gone to work in the World Trade Center. I'm sure I wouldn't have spent the amount of time that you did preparing and making sure I knew where everything was. And I think we have a really bad habit of taking things for granted and not looking forward to prepare ourselves.
Well,
So,
yeah, and look, there are blind people who are that way. It's
yeah.
most people don't learn how to deal with that stuff.
Hmm. So tell us some of the things that you talk about in the book, some of the lessons that you've learned or some of the lessons that you want to impart.
Well, um, a lot of it has to do with what I learned from the dog. So, for example, my first guide dog, Squire, um, was a very bright dog, but Squire was very committed. He figured out me at the age of 14. And in college, he had to confront some fear because one day some people decided while I was in a room next door to my room, or actually just across the hall, working on a physics problem with a colleague from my class. We shared a class together. They came in and they took Squire out, and then somebody set off a firecracker right next to him, and
Oh
Squire took off
no.
running. And they eventually caught him, and got yelled at a lot by us. But
Yeah.
he was afraid of those things after that. But even so, he was able to work through it to be able to guide and
Hmm.
continue to guide. Another story about Squire, uh, we went to UC Irvine, and I had my first year during the 4th year of the college even being open, which meant it was its first year that they had a graduation. And a lot of people to this big open empty campus would bring their dogs and just let their dogs run while they were in class. Some of the dogs formed a pack, and one day they decided they were going to come after Squire and me. And we were walking to class, And I heard these dogs behind me, and they were growling and they were getting closer. And all of a sudden, Squire just jerked, leaped ahead of me. I was able to hold on to his leash, but he pulled his harness right out of my hand.
Mhm.
He spun around in the air. Somebody described it later. We had a witness, and just landed on all fours, hunkered down, bared his teeth, and growled at these dogs. Now, Squire was a golden retriever who I would never expect anything like that from. But
Mhm.
Squire knew what he had to do. Those dogs slunk away,
Oh, wow.
you know. Um, and so it was surprise. But again, Squire knew what he had to do to deal with the situation,
Mhm.
and knew how to form a team and be part of a team, looking to me to form it. And we had a lot of trust for each other and all the time that I had Squire. He actually got his own degree when we graduated. He was when we graduated, he was um, 9, I think it was, and he was slowing down some. So the chancellor gave him a degree in lethargic guidance.
Lethargic
Yeah,
guidance.
that's
I
great.
love that.
Yeah, it was great.
Oh, man, that's so sweet. And you got him when you were 14?
I got him when I was 14, and so he was born in in I guess it would be May of well, I'm not sure actually. I guess it would be May of 1962 because in May of 63 he would have only been 11 months when I got him. So he must
Oh,
have been born in May of 1962. So when he retired, he was actually more than 9. He was 10. So,
yeah. So you said you've had 8 guide dogs?
I'm on number 8 now. I got my
Mhm.
first one in 1964, and I've been using guide dogs ever since. And,
Aw.
one of the issues is that also dogs love teamwork,
Mhm.
unless they're just incredibly traumatized. They love teamwork. They love to have somebody to, if you will, report to. They love to please. They
Mhm.
only want to know what the rules are. And
Yes.
as I said, they're very open to trust. And if you develop that trusting relationship, there's nothing better than that. It's great.
Yeah, I just love dogs. I have 2 myself, and there's nothing better than those babies.
Mm-mm, not at all.
So, I have some of the things that it says that in your book you talk about, and one of the things is, and we've touched on it, but learn how to use your natural fear reactions as a way to focus and concentrate to make better decisions and turn your fear into courage and confidence. And you touched on that, talking about 9/11. Is there anything else that you want to say about that? How people can get more in tune with that?
Well, I think it's all about getting in tune with yourself. One of the things that I think is very important that people should do is at night when they're falling asleep and even in the morning when they wake up, take time to think about what happened yesterday. How did it go? What worked? What didn't work? I don't believe in failure. That is to say, I think failure is a horrible term to use.
Yeah.
When we don't get things the way we want, it's a learning experience. There may very well be reasons that we can overcome to make that happen correctly, or we may have to rethink. But it
Mhm.
isn't a failure. It's time to learn a lesson. And what we need to do is to take the time at the end of the day and in the morning when we wake up to think about what happened, what was good, what wasn't, and the good stuff. Could we have done it even better? The stuff that didn't go well, why didn't it go well? And really stop and think about it, because that's how you start to develop your mental mind muscle
Mhm.
to deal with things. And you can do that with fear. Why was I afraid of that person yesterday? What really was it that made me be afraid of him?
Mhm.
Was it that he's 2 feet taller than I? Is that it? Am I afraid of something that much bigger, or is it something else? But
Mhm.
think about it. As Mark Twain, among others, once said, the biggest problem with fear and what we are afraid of is that most of those things will never come true anyway.
Yes.
And we need to really do a better job of our own selves in analyzing and looking at those things. I am a firm believer. I've become like this. over the last year. But I used to talk about when I had a radio program at the University of California Irvine radio station, KUCI, 89.9 on your dial. I would record a lot of my shows. And when I gave speeches and give speeches today, I like to record them
Mhm.
because I want to go back and listen to them. And I used to say, I do that because I'm my own worst critic. I'm going to criticize me more than anybody else. And I realized what a horrible thing to say. I'm not my own worst critic. I'm the ultimate one that has to teach me. I'm my own best teacher.
Yes.
It's a positive thing. And if I learn to think about that, I'm going to look at and not fear those kinds of events, listening to old speeches and such. I'm my own best teacher. This is the time to learn. And it's right here. Did I really say that? My gosh, is that what I wanted to say? Well, maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. But I can become my own best teacher. And that is so much better again than dealing with it in a negative, I'm my own worst critic. I'm not my own worst critic. I am my own best teacher.
That is such a great point, and there are so many people that I've met who are like, I never listen to recordings, I never go back and watch something I did or whatever, and I'm always like, "What? Why not?" And I don't know if I guess some people just don't wanna look at themselves or listen to themselves, but I think some people are afraid they'll look stupid or whatever, but I agree with you that how can you learn what you're doing wrong or what you're doing right if you're not going back and reviewing it?
Well, and the issue is go back and review it, and you know what you're going to hear mostly,
Yeah.
but you'll hear other things as well that you've forgotten about. But go back and listen to it and accept that this is what you did then. How do I move forward and make it better next time?
Mhm.
Now, the answer might be there's nothing else I can do. If you're really honest about it and there's nothing else you can do, then there's nothing else you can do. You did a great job. The
Yeah.
other part about it is, and I know that people are always so afraid of public speaking, audiences want you to succeed. They don't want you to fail.
Yeah.
And they're going to be on your side. And one of the more important things that I've learned is I don't talk to an audience. I don't lecture an audience. I talk with an audience. I will find ways to involve them,
Mhm.
and based on how they react to different things that I do or say, I know how much I've drawn them in. And that's important for me to be able to do. But I talk with an audience and I customize every talk that I give and love to work with people to make sure that that happens because that's the way I have to do it.
Yeah, and you do a lot of speaking, right?
I do. During the pandemic, it died down. And then Karen became ill in 2022, and I couldn't really do a lot of traveling. I did one, I think, event in 2020, maybe two in
Mhm.
2022, but that was it. And she passed on November 12th of 2022. So we were married 40 years.
Wow.
And I know that she's up there monitoring me and probably laughing at me. But
Yep.
if I misbehave, I'm going to hear about it. So
Oh, Lord. Well, so did you do much speaking before 9/11, or is that something you started more after that? I know you spoke in some way to clients and training and so forth, but the public speaking type things.
not really public speaking. I did a couple of things with a church program, but not really public
Mhm.
speaking. That all really happened after September 11th. Um, Larry King heard about me on Thursday the 13th, and on the 14th, I had my first of 5 interviews with Larry King. And almost immediately after that, then we started getting some people who called and said, "We want to hire you to come and talk to us about what we should learn." And Karen and I talked about that some, and we decided together, although she left it up to me, but I really wanted her to be part of the decision. We decided together that if I could help people move on from September 11th, if I could teach people more about blindness and educate them about what blindness was and what it wasn't, and if I
Mhm.
could teach them about guide dogs and so on, then it was worth doing. And as I tell people today, it's a whole lot more fun selling life and philosophy than it was selling computer hardware. So I decided to do that. And I also did work with Guide Dogs for the Blind for 6 years, almost 6.5 years. Um, but I've been a public speaker since right after September 11th, 2001, and enjoy it. and I get to meet so many wonderful people and gain a lot of perspectives on how they look at things. And I
Mhm.
get to, to talk to people and at so many different kinds of events. I've been on to school events and I talked to colleges and universities and so on, and talked to a number of different classes. I had a class um, where they asked me to speak during an event. They actually had me do several talks, but one of them was a class on terror. And
Mm.
I was sitting there talking, and this guy got up and he asked the question. He said, "I got to ask you, um, should I vote for Donald Trump?" This was in 20, and maybe it was even in 2020 or 2019. And I said, "Well, are you seriously just trying to decide what you want to do?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Okay, um, I can't answer that question for you, but let me ask you a question. Would you want Donald Trump to hire you as an employee, and would you go work for Donald Trump as an employee?" And he
Mhm.
thought about it for a second. He said, "No." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Because I can't trust the guy." I
Mm.
said, "Okay, then why are you even asking the question? You've just answered your own question. Do you really want to work for a boss you can't trust?"
Mhm.
Now, if he can earn your trust, that's one thing. But if he can't earn your trust and truly earn your trust and do something that makes you feel that you can truly trust him, then why would you want to vote for him if you can't trust him?
Yeah, and that goes with everything in life, whether
And
it's a
that goes with
partner.
everything in life, right?
Yeah, whether it's a partner, and I think a lot of times whether it's somebody that we're dating, a spouse, whatever, coworker, a lot of time we're either too hard on people or we make excuses and we don't stand up for ourselves and expect what we deserve, I guess. Um, so
I
yeah.
I think we always have to look at things. And um, would I vote for Joe Biden?
Mhm.
The same answer, by the way. If he had asked me about Joe Biden, I would have asked the same question and looked for whatever answer he's going to give. But
Yeah.
um, I think that there is a big significant difference between those two candidates. I really would like to see somebody new and more innovative, but I also think that most young people don't want to subject themselves to the kinds of things that are being done by these people. And what we need to do is to get more young people to stand up and say what they really want and
Mhm.
hold everyone else's feet to the fire.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I'm, you know, veering off here a little bit, but oh my gosh, I can't imagine being a politician.
Yeah,
It
it's
just,
hard.
yeah,
It's
and especially now, there's just so much more scrutiny because we are so much more connected. Everything, it's like kind of like, oh, I would never be able to do it. But of
well,
course,
we're connected and we're not. I mean, we
yes,
see all this stuff on social media, but we we only look at the the high the high end stuff. We don't get into the details and really analyze, and that's what we need to do.
we
The
do.
information is there.
And then on a personal level with people, a lot of younger people, and this is not to cut them down or anything, but the soft skills are missing, and a lot of companies find that problem with when they're trying to hire, that they have a hard time finding people who do have the soft skills. And I actually know people who train special forces in tactical mobility training before they deploy, and they said a lot of what they end up teaching them are soft skills, that it ends up being more of the soft skills than they would have expected and less of the real military type skills because that's lacking now.
Hmm.
That because back when we were growing up, people had to be more face to face and interact with each other and learn how to communicate face to face more.
It's all about real communication.
Yeah. And
and
then, of
true connection.
course, COVID made it harder also. I can't imagine being a younger person and you're disconnected from everybody, and then everybody's wearing masks. So, not only can you not, if you are a sighted person, you can't see their expressions and so forth, but their voices are more muffled. So people who have hearing loss have a harder time, communicating because so anyway, there are just so many things that have converged over the past few years that have made all of that harder.
Yeah, there we've got to get back to having conversations. People won't even converse anymore. They don't want to talk because they haven't learned to listen. They haven't learned to converse, and so it's a lot harder to really learn about what's going on around you. Again, all the more reason why I think people need to be more introspective at night. They really
Mhm.
need to stop, analyze what's going on, look at their world, and figure out what they want to do and take the time to do it. And so many people say, I don't have the time to do that. You always have time to do
Yeah,
it.
you have the time because you're on there watching videos or doing whatever. Here's the other thing, a lot of us, especially if something bad happens or that we perceive as bad or negative or whatever, we just wanna forget about it. We just wanna get past it. But that's such a good idea to make yourself take the time, even if it's only a couple of minutes, that what happened today that I can learn from, good and bad? What
Yeah.
were my successes? How can I take those forward? And what were the things that I could have done a better job at? And what can I learn from that?
There are so many things that we could do, and we need to take the time to do it. And it will help develop our own mental faculties and our
Mhm.
own mental acumen. Like I said, the brain is a muscle that we can develop, and we can learn skills about how not to let fear overwhelm us. And again,
Mhm.
I'm not going to say we can learn not to be afraid. Not at all.
Right.
Fear is a very healthy thing, but we have to be the ones to decide how to control it.
Yeah, fear has a function. Like with myself, I'm terrified of snakes, Michael. And it's like I can feel the fluttering in my ears, just like seeing a snake. So I have been forcing myself to like go on Reddit, for example, and look at the subreddit about snakes,
Yeah.
forcing myself to look at pictures, look at videos, and appreciate them for the creature that they are instead of the slithery snake. And that's just one example of that we need to face our fears. Does that mean that I want a snake and that I want to have one in my house? And
No.
no, but it just to learn to think more rationally and not reactionary.
Yeah. I mean, that is an example, and we
Mhm.
we all need to do that, and we need to take the time to develop our minds, and we
Yeah.
can.
Well, I want to ask you, so the upcoming book, and it's coming out in August, right?
Correct.
And it's Live Like a Guide Dog.
So the
Tell
book
us the
is
rest of the title, the
so it's
subtitle.
Live Like a Guide Dog: True Stories from a Blind Man and His Dogs about being brave, overcoming adversity, and walking in faith.
Oh.
And I think you have the link, and if you put it in the show notes, there's a link where people can go read more about it and actually pre-order the book.
Yes,
Um,
I have the link to that, and I also have the link to the book, the, Thunder Dog, about you and Roselle and 9/11. Was that
uh,
made into a show or a movie?
it has not been yet.
Okay,
Working toward it still.
okay, because I couldn't remember if I imagined that or not, I was like, "Yeah, for some reason, I just was thinking maybe it had been,
Yeah.
but I know Thunder Dog is an amazing book. I cannot wait to read Live Like a Guide Dog and the lessons in it. It's gonna be so good. Are there any other lessons that you wanna share with us or any tidbits from it?
I think we've hit really some of the highlights. I think the most important thing is that people can learn to control fear. So one of the things that I talk about, and I talk about it in Live Like a Guide Dogs a little bit, and I've talked about it during talks I've given over the past year, is so many people continue to say, "Well, your dog led you out." They say that you're visually impaired, which is
Mm,
one of the most disgustingly horrible things. anyone can say, because a blind person, first of all, isn't visually different simply because they're blind.
Yeah.
Visual has nothing to do with it. And impaired, why am I being compared to how much eyesight someone has? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Blind or low vision is a much more accurate term. But last March, that is March of 2023, I happened to be down in Los Angeles at a hotel. It was 3 in the afternoon. My niece and nephew and I were there, and we had gone up to the third floor. We put our luggage in our room, and we were walking down the stairs. It was very visible, light, and all that, and doors were open. And suddenly, everyone started to scream. And I asked my niece, "What's going on?" And she was calm. She said, "Oh, well, we just lost power in the hotel and the surrounding area." She obviously could see down the stairs
Mm-hmm.
and all that. And so she said, "We lost power." Everyone was screaming at 3 in the afternoon because they didn't have light.
Uh-huh.
And it told me something that I've come to realize, that you all have as much of disability as I do. Your arrogance sometimes
Yes.
likes to think differently, but you're light dependent.
Yes.
Thomas Edison invented the electric light bulb in 1878 so that you could have light on demand.
Mm-hmm.
And we have spent the last 146 years creating better, faster, easier to use light on demand technology, but that's covering up your disability. It is
It
still
is.
there whether you like it or not. The reality is light dependence is as much a disability as light independence is a disability.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact is that what we need to learn is that disability does not mean lack of ability. And so many people say, when I say that, well, but disability starts with dis. I said,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. So does disciple. So does discern. So does discrete. Where's the dis and the negative in that? The
Yeah.
reality is disability doesn't mean lack of ability. Disability is a characteristic that everyone has. It manifests itself differently for different people depending on what their disability is. But make no mistake about it, everyone has a disability.
For sure. When we were kids, Daddy, he would stay in our basement a lot listening to music. And of course, he didn't have lights on. And we or anybody, if somebody came to visit and they went in there, where do I turn the lights on? He's like, why do you need a light? I don't have one. And, he would always tease people and make them, think a little bit. One of my sister and I were laughing the other day. She's 2.5 years younger than me. And when she was little bitty, like a toddler, um, we were just talking about lessons we learned from him, and she was playing in the floor, and he came walking through, this tall man in big cowboy boots, and she said, me, to let him know she was there. And she was probably maybe 18 months old or something. And we both just remember he swooped her up, and he told her what a good job she did, and that how much she helped him. And that's something that we've always remembered. That, I don't know, I'm not conveying it very
Yeah,
well,
no,
but
I understand. And, the reality is, I've gotten used to living with Karen for 40 years, turning the lights on at night.
yeah, for
Sometimes I'll
her.
forget, and
Uh-huh.
sometimes I forget to turn them off. But, um, I still turn the lights on for the dog and the cat,
Yeah.
and it's okay.
Yeah.
But I believe in helping those who are less fortunate than I. But seriously, it's no problem to turn the lights on, and I do that as a matter of course, and
Yeah.
that's fine. But
Yeah.
don't say for a minute that I'm impaired just because I don't use light. And that's something
Exactly.
that people need to learn. Blindness isn't the problem. It's our attitude about it and
Mhm.
our lack of education about it that's the real issue.
Yeah.
And if my life and what happened in the World Trade Center and all the things that we've talked about tonight means anything at all, it is to say, look, we all have gifts. And we all don't necessarily share the same gifts, but don't knock anyone because their gifts are different than yours. You may find that someday you'll rely on those gifts to help you.
Yes, everybody's gifts are different. Everybody has different strengths and different weaknesses. If we all had the same strengths and weaknesses, We
We'd
wouldn't
be
be that
Vulcans.
much help to each other, would we?
We'd be Vulcans
Yeah. Yeah.
from Star Trek.
Yeah. Well, Michael, it's great to have you on. I cannot wait to read the book. I'm so excited, and I'm going to go also add in the show notes the link to the last episode. You were on here a couple of years ago, um, and we were talking. So I'm going to add a link to that so that people can listen to that episode as well.
Well, great. Thank you. I appreciate that. And in any way we can help, let me
Yeah.
know. If people want to learn more about me, they're welcome to visit my website, which is www.michaelhingson.com. That's michaelhingson.com. I also work with a company called Accessibee that you know about. It's a company
Yes.
that, among other things, uses AI to help make websites more inclusive. And it's an issue because most websites today are not built with accessibility in mind for people with a variety of different kinds of disabilities. And Accessibee has developed technology that, at a very inexpensive price, can overcome that
Yeah.
to a very large degree. So people can reach out to you to explore that. They're also welcome to go to accessibee.com. That's ACCESSIBE.com. And if they go there, they can actually click on a link that says get a website audit, and they can plug in their website address and get a complete free audit of how accessible their website really is. And when they discover that, then they should reach out to you to deal with getting that addressed,
Or
because that's
directly to Accessibee. And I want
or
to tell
directly to
y'all,
Accessibee.
yeah, and I wanna tell y'all when Michael talks about accessibility in a website, it's not just for blind people. There are like people who have seizures,
Well, yeah,
epilepsy.
if you have
Mhm,
epilepsy, for example, one of the things that you often run into on websites are blinking elements, and that
mhm.
can throw you into a seizure. And with Accessibee, there are things that you can do that will stop the elements from blinking, so it will not cause you to have a seizure.
Yeah,
Um, and there are a variety of things. Other people who use keyboards and don't use mice, quadriplegics and so on, people who are paralyzed, or other people. There are just a variety of disabilities that Accessibee handles and helps address. So I urge people to learn about it, because the Americans with Disabilities Act is really pretty clear. Now, some lawyers would say, but the ADA doesn't ever mention the internet because it came along first. Yeah,
mhm.
well, that may very well be, but the ADA doesn't talk about physical places of accommodation only either. And the Department of Justice has determined that in reality, the internet is a place of business, and as a result, it is covered by Title II of the ADA. So the internet
Yeah.
needs to be accessible. So by you making your website accessible, here's the fear tactic: you avoid lawyers coming after you. But
Yeah.
the more important issue is, if you make your website usable, and there are organizations like the Nielsen Rating Organization and others who have done surveys that show that, since, as the CDC says, the Center for Disease Control says, up to 25% of all people have a disability, do you want to really leave out up to 25% of all your potential customers by
Ex
not making your website accessible? And more important, if you make your website accessible and inclusive, people with disabilities are more apt to come back to you because you made them feel welcome, and what you
Exactly.
offer really helps. And that's one of the things that people should do. So I really urge people to deal with website accessibility and website technology, and Accessibee can help you with that. And as I said, go to accessibee.com to learn more about that. I think it will be very helpful to do. But
Yes,
I
and I was gonna reiterate what you had said a few minutes ago. It's very inexpensive. And it continually updates for your changes to your website. So you're not having to have a developer that's constantly there going back and redoing things. And as Michael said, the more welcoming you can make your website, the more people will be able to use it and will visit and will continue to come back. Just like you want to make your home welcome for guests, you want to make your website welcome to as many people as possible.
It makes perfect sense to do.
Yeah,
And
it
as I
does.
said, you can reach out to me at michaelhingson.com. I do travel and speak. If any of you are looking for a keynote speaker to come in and address your organization, I'd love to chat with you. Um, you can go to michaelhingson.com or email me at speaker, speaker, at michaelhingson.com, michaelhingson.com. Love to chat with anyone who is interested. Um, we're looking for opportunities. It's fun to do, and I have the time to do it now that that Karen has passed.
Hmm.
But she monitors me, so I'm perfectly happy to say it that um, now I don't have to worry about being at home, so I can go out and travel and speak. And I'd love to come and
Hmm.
talk to your events.
Well, and y'all can tell from just hearing Michael speak on here that he's very personable and entertaining, and he customizes his his speaking with whatever audience he's with. So he's not just going to come up there and speak, do some memorized speech that he has. It's very interesting and personable and interacting with the audience. So I highly encourage anybody out there who is thinking about having any type of speaker at your event, reach out to Michael and talk with him about the topics that he speaks about and see if he's a good match for your event.
And I also do not charge by the talk. So if you want me to come, we work it all out, and I will do more than one presentation. If you want me to do breakout sessions and so on, I'm glad to do that. So love to meet you. Love to chat with you about it.
Well, that's great. I didn't realize that. So that I'm really glad that you pointed that out. So yeah, y'all please do reach out to Michael. Michael, thank you so much for joining me tonight. It was great to catch up with you again.
It was fun. I really appreciate your time and that you did this.
Yeah, I'll talk with you soon and I will see everybody else next week. Thanks, y'all. Good night.
Good night.